Growing up, board games were the way my family bonded with one another. When my dad bankrupted me in Monopoly, I knew that was his way of saying I love you. Now that I'm older, I've dived deeper into the world of board games and discovered so many great gems. Today, I'll be going through a part of our board game collection. These are all games that can be played with just 2 players, but some are not limited to just 2. I'll also be ranking them in a tier list, but with a cozy homebody twist. On top, we have the weekend goals. These are the heavy hitters, the games that motivate me to work hard during the week so that I can spend all weekend getting lost in them. Followed by the rainy day staples. These are the games that are comforting and reliable. You just know you're going to have a good time without too much stress. Then, the occasional house guest. They're good, but they require a specific mood or certain level of energy to want to reach for them. And lastly, try again next time. These are the games that seem to have so much potential, but for some reason, we just haven't found the flow with them yet. We have 15 games to get through today, so let's get started. Up first, we have Cascadia. In this game, each player builds their own little ecosystem inspired by the Pacific Northwest. You take turns picking a habitat tile and a wooden animal token to create these beautiful sprawling landscapes of salmon, hawks, bears, foxes, and elk. What I love most about Cascadia is how incredibly easy it is to learn and how almost meditative the process feels. Since you aren't attacking each other's habitats, there's no direct conflict. Instead, it feels like a quiet puzzle where you're just considering the placement and rotation of your tiles and finding the best positions for your wildlife to score. If you're in the mood for a bit more strategy, you can focus on collecting these little pine cones, which represent nature tokens. They allow you to take extra actions like reshuffling the display if the options don't quite fit your vision. With all the different wildlife scoring cards, there's so much replayability here. But honestly, it's the kind of game where even if I don't win, I still end up feeling so satisfied just looking at the little map I've built on the table in front of me. It's a beautiful, comforting game that never feels like a chore to set up, which is why I'm placing it in the rainy day staples tier. Next, we have Tokaido Duo. If you've ever played the original Tokaido, you'll know it's famous for its clean, minimalistic Japanese aesthetic. This version is designed strictly for 2 players, but it's just as beautiful on the table. In this game, you're each controlling 3 different characters, a merchant, artist, and pilgrim, as they journey across the island of Shikoku. What I find so interesting about this one is the balance. You're trying to advance all 3 of your characters at once, but you're sharing a pool of dice with your partner. So you're constantly weighing whether to take the die you need or the one that might block your partner from getting what they need. Even though there's more blocking involved than Cascadia, Tokaido Duo never feels aggressive. Instead, it just feels like a gentle tug of war that's the perfect amount of interaction between the players. Tokaido Duo is actually the one game we are sure to bring with us on our camping trips because it doesn't take up much space, but it always ensures a good time. So I think I'm going to have to place it in the rainy day staples on top of Cascadia. Okay, let's take a sharp pivot from the little peaceful Japanese island to something more dark and fantastical, Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. This is a cooperative deck building game where you're working together to defend Hogwarts from villains. You play a number of cards from your hand to gain health, attack points, and influence to be able to get even more powerful cards. The base game is divided into 7 separate games that follow the movies, so the gameplay actually gets longer, more complex, and honestly can be quite challenging as the villains start to overwhelm you. If you love the world of Harry Potter, you're going to love the nostalgia of items like the invisibility cloak and time turner to familiar faces like Luna Lovegood and Dobby. It's the kind of game that requires a lot of teamwork and focus to win, so you can definitely get lost in it on a Saturday, but you'll have the best time. We personally love it so much that we have both the Monsters and Charms and Potions expansions, but the base game itself is already really good. This one is definitely going into the top weekend goals tier. Up next, we have Rivals for Catan. This is a 2-player rendition of the original Catan game, but instead of a big board, it's a card-based game where you're building your own principality. The game is quite easy to pick up as it first teaches you the basics with an introductory game, and then you move on to focusing on different themes that add more rules, expansions, and even aggressive cards. So how you collect resources is by rolling the dice and rotating your cards to accumulate them. Like Catan, you have to use these resources to build settlements connected by roads. And as the game progresses, you expand your settlements and cities, recruit heroes, and even defend your lands through politics and invention. If you like the base game, I would recommend getting either or both of the expansion boxes in order to increase replayability. You can also combine 3 different themes to customize the game and shift your strategies so that each game feels unique. I remember one year where we literally played this every weekend, but recently it's shifted more into the occasional house guest tier just because we found other games that we prefer. Nevertheless, I would still highly recommend it if you're a fan of the Catan universe and looking for a solid 2-player experience. Next, we have Parks. I've said this before, but Parks is arguably the most beautiful game I've ever seen, from the token design down to the graphic design and illustrations of the US national parks. The mechanics of the game are very intuitive. You basically play a hiker trekking through different trails across the 4 seasons of the year. Along the way, you collect memories, represented by resources like sunshine and mountains, which you eventually trade in to visit a national park. At the same time, you're trying to obtain canteens and gear in order to improve your access to resources throughout the game. What I love about Parks is how cozy and atmospheric it feels. It's not an overly complex game, but you still have to balance engine building versus resource spending. It's the perfect way to go on an adventure without ever leaving your living room, so it's another firm rainy day staple for me. Next, we have In the Footsteps of Darwin. This is a tile placement game where you're traveling on the HMS Beagle, studying animals and writing your own edition of The Origin of Species. The illustrations are beautiful, the turnaround is quick, and the little journal you're filling out is so aesthetically pleasing. My favorite detail is probably the extra booklet that contains all the actual information on the species that Darwin discovered. However, as much as I love the aesthetics of this game, it kind of lacks in the 2-player experience. Because your movement is dictated by where the last player went, in a 2-player game, it can feel a bit more like you're reacting to the board rather than building an engine that you're excited about. So I'm ranking this in the lowest tier, but I do have to say that we enjoyed it more when we played with 3 or more players, especially on those evenings when you just want something very light and easy to play. Following that, we have Azul Duel. This is a 2-player specific experience that retains all the beauty of the original Azul tiles in a much smaller box, but packs a lot more strategy and thinking. In this game, you're still drafting tiles to complete your board, but because it's a duel, it feels almost like a game of chess. Every move you make is a direct response to your partner. You're constantly checking their board to see which colors they need or which colors you can force them to take to give them negative points. There's also an extra tactical dimension where you have to determine the specific pattern in which the tiles will be placed, so there's a surprising amount of depth for such a fast-paced game. This game checks all the boxes for me. It's easy to learn, fast-paced, aesthetically pleasing, strategic, while being just a little bit mean. So I'm going to add it to the rainy day staples tier. The next game is Harmonies, and shout out to Martin for recommending it. So when I was teaching Pat this game, I described it as if Azul Duel and Cascadia had a more abstract, more complicated baby. It has that similar drafting element where you're picking tokens from a specific pool, but you're using them to build mountains, trees, and rivers to attract different animals to your board. What makes it feel totally unique is how you're building upwards as well to create this sort of abstract 3D landscape. It's a game that looks deceptively easy, but there's actually a lot of forward thinking involved from the moment you start taking tokens. Should I build a bush or a tree? How high should this mountain be? Should I focus on specific animals or make it a diverse habitat? Because of its open-endedness, there's a lot of creative freedom and definitely a big replayability factor there. Sadly, Pat still isn't a big fan of this one.
I remember why I don't like that game.
It is really complicated.
It's so stressful.
But I love it, so I'm working on convincing him to try it out a few more times. So I'm going to add it into the rainy day staples tier. Speaking of games that I love but stresses Pat out, we have Turing Machine. Turing Machine is a competitive deduction game that offers a truly unique experience of questioning a mechanical protocomputer that works entirely without any electricity. The goal is to crack a secret 3-digit code before your partner by asking the machine the right logic questions. To do this, you layer 3 physical punch cards together to form a proposal and line it up with the chosen verifier to see if it passes or fails the specific test. This game is the ultimate puzzle for testing your deduction skills, but I found that the secret to winning is taking really good notes. Once you've worked through all 20 problems in the booklet, there are literally millions more available on their website, making it infinitely replayable. I truly love the brilliance of this game design, but I do think that it requires a very specific and sharp mental mood to want to open the box, so I'm ranking it in the occasional house guest tier. Now for the total opposite of a stressful puzzle, Patchwork. If there was a Hall of Fame for 2-player specific games, this would be up there. You're essentially competing to build the most aesthetic and high-scoring quilt using Tetris-like fabric patches while collecting these little blue buttons as currency. On a turn, a player can purchase one of the 3 patches clockwise in front of the wooden token. You're free to place the patch anywhere on your board, but you probably want to fit things together as tightly as possible. You can try to be strategic in order to get these handy 1x1 patches, and also race to be the first to get the 7x7 bonus. Patchwork is a quiet and tactile game that never fails to hit that contentment factor. It's simple enough to play while having a long conversation, but deep enough that you always just want to play one more round. It's basically a warm hug in a box, so quite fittingly, it's a rainy day staple. On the same thread of lightweight 2-player games, we have SkyTeam. This is a cooperative game where you and your partner are a pilot and a co-pilot trying to land a commercial airliner at different airports around the world. You do this by rolling and placing dice to balance the axis of your plane, control its speed, deploy the flaps, and so on. This game is played over 7 rounds and you are allowed to discuss a strategy before the round starts. But once you roll those dice, you and your partner have to be completely silent. This means no talking, no gestures, just pure concentration and telepathic mind reading. The silence in this game creates so much tension and perfectly captures the meaning of teamwork in such a short amount of time. The game really shines when you play with the same partner. You start to build this camaraderie as you start to anticipate exactly what the other person is thinking. With the extra modules and 21 different scenarios, this game also has a ton of replayability. I think SkyTeam hits the sweet spot of luck and strategy while being incredibly lightweight yet deep, which is why it's absolutely deserving of the top tier weekend game spot for us. Next, we have Beer and Bread. With a rustic fairy tale-like art style, this seems like it's going to be the ultimate cozy experience when in fact, it's a total brain burner as you try to pull off the ultimate balancing act. You're representing 2 neighboring villages over the course of 6 years, alternating between fruitful and dry seasons. In each year or round, you play the cards that have multiple uses. You can upgrade your facilities, harvest ingredients like wheat and barley, or use those ingredients to bake bread or brew beer. The alternating rounds put an interesting twist on card drafting and resource management. And since the game is called Beer and Bread, you have to strike a perfect balance between your baked and liquid goods. At the end of the game, you only score for whichever category that you earned fewer points for. It's a really unique scoring system, but it can leave you feeling a bit unsatisfied after stressing your brain out for 6 rounds. Because of that, we don't reach for it that often, so I'm placing this in the occasional house guest tier. Now we're moving into a modern day kitchen with Kitchen Rush. This is a real-time cooperative game where you and your partner are trying to run a successful restaurant business. Your workers are represented by sand timers, which you place on different stations to take orders, prep ingredients, cook meals, and wash dishes. But the catch is, you can't move a worker until their sand has completely run out. In Kitchen Rush, you work through 8 scenarios with increasing difficulty and slowly unlock more areas of your restaurant, such as the herb garden and grocery truck. By the end, each game will be played over 4 rounds of 4 minutes. I like to describe this as the board game version of Overcooked. You're definitely going to end up shouting across the table like, "I need carrots," or "Who's doing the dishes?" as you frantically try to serve as many orders as possible within the time limit. It's highly stressful but also weirdly enjoyable. I'm a bit torn on the ranking for this one. Once we open it up, I get really excited to play it every single evening, which feels like a weekend goal. But once we beat all 8 scenarios, we pack it up and don't open it for like a whole year or even 2. So for that reason, I think I'm going to drop it into the occasional house guest tier. Another bigger box game, Terraforming Mars. You play as rival corporations competing to make Mars habitable by raising the temperature and oxygen levels, creating oceans, and planting greenery. In this game, you manage 6 types of resources: mega credits, steel, titanium, plants, energy, and heat. And ideally, you want to increase your production levels as much as possible. You do this by buying and building from a deck of over 200 unique cards. However, you'll quickly realize how expensive those cards are, so it's a constant balance between buying them and actually having the resources to play them. This is the ultimate engine building game, and honestly, my favorite game of all time. In fact, I now benchmark every other heavy game against Terraforming Mars. While many play this with 3 or 4 people, we actually love the 2-player experience the most. I should also mention that we play this game with every expansion except for Turmoil, so a game can take us anywhere between 1.5 to 3 hours. It's definitely a long and heavy game, but one that I would gladly play every single evening if Pat would survive it. So it's a no-brainer that it's going into the top weekend goals tier. Finally, we have eMission, or otherwise known as Daybreak. This is a cooperative game by Matt Leacock, the creator of Pandemic, about the weightiest subject of all: stopping climate change. Each player controls a world power, and you work together to implement green technologies and social policies to bring global emissions to 0. Every time you play a card, you're making a choice. Do you implement that specific project, or do you cleverly use its symbols to boost your other existing projects? Aesthetics-wise, this is every designer's dream. Every element from the board to the tokens, down to the instruction manual, looks beautiful in vivid CMYK colors. But what I love most is the mission. Every card has a QR code leading to factual information and how you as an individual can contribute to climate action. Overall, it's a complex game that requires a lot of thought, and I love the amount of interaction involved. You're responsible for your own projects, but you're also constantly talking, planning, and even cheering each other on as you work towards a shared mission. It's the perfect game to play when you want to feel inspired and productive together, so I'm placing this in the rainy day staples. And that concludes the first part of our board game collection. A big shout out to my channel members for their constant support and making it possible to do unsponsored videos like this one that are also kinda out of my niche, but something I deeply enjoy. Let me know if you enjoyed this video and want to see a part 2 where I share even more games that we enjoy with just 2 players. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.